Hello everyone, my name is Amara. I'm part of the UK sales team. If you're just joining us, welcome to our virtual education day. If you attended our previous session earlier this morning, welcome back. It's so great to see all of you here with us today. I'm pleased to introduce our next guest speaker, Dr. Ian Rowe. Ian was one of our first LT users when LT was initially released, and has continued to use LT now at the University of Glasgow to teach physiology across a range of degree programs. Before I pass over to Ian, you'll notice the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You can use this to ask questions throughout. Your questions will be answered at the end. There'll also be the option for more interactive questioning at the end of Ian's talk as well. Just as a reminder, this session is being recorded and streamed live on YouTube. Without further ado, Ian, the stage is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Amara, and good morning, everybody, and hopefully you can hear me. And thank you very much to AD Instruments for inviting me along to give this short talk. What I'm going to do is do what we're all very familiar with, hopefully by now, is going to try and share my screen and take you through some of my views on how we can be using LT and some of my experience of that under our current conditions. So I'm going to try and find the right screen to share, and off we go. I want to look at how we use LT in terms of creativity, of the colleagues who are central to its use, and those colleagues include students, and the kind of co-production of material, which I think is core when it comes to LT. I've just moved to the University of Glasgow, and one of the things we have to do is make students aware of what's going on. And one of the things we've done is we're trying to make them feel welcome and explain to them the problems that we have in running labs under current conditions. So we put together videos like this in order to try and explain to students what's going on and understand why the context of what we're trying to do, the 2-meter distancing and all these kind of things really do matter. And trying to introduce them to labs, which hopefully they will eventually get into, and introduce them to the personnel and get some sense of the experience that they will get from the lab and what we can deliver through LT. And we're doing this through a collective experience, a collective response. It's not just me, it's a number of people, the technicians and GTAs. And we're actually going through the labs. We're giving people clips of what they would expect and what we would hope them to expect within teaching. Now, I have quite a lot of experience of online teaching. I also have experience of working with students as partners. So we hope that the experience we have currently and the experience we're building on will enable us to deliver material in a way that's useful to our students. Once again, we've had to be a little bit creative. We've actually had to do things rather differently. We have become not necessarily film buffs, but we have become quite creative in what we're doing. Once again, that gives you a little bit of a taste for what we're doing. Hopefully, as I say, I can take you through, the different aspects of what we're doing. But one of the things we most certainly aren't doing is being remote. Everybody has their own views of what distance is, how things should appear. One of the things we have to make sure is even if we're teaching at a distance, we're not remote in what we do. Everybody has their own definition. These are some of the different definitions people have come up with for distance. But what we don't want to be is remote. This is an example of remote. It has a personal example of remote. It's where I used to live when I was a teenager. It is the area which has the worst selling Ordnance Survey map in the UK because basically not many people go there. It is actually rather beautiful, but it is remarkably remote. What we have to try and do is make sure that that remoteness isn't what our students experience, that they don't experience a remote aspect of teaching, and similarly that the staff don't. So we can be distant and we can be at a distance, but we shouldn't be remote. And I think those are sort of some of the themes that I would like to kind of come back to. I have tons of experience of online teaching and development. We've done a number of online courses, particularly for NHS Education Scotland, where we've used LT actually to develop the online materials and deliver them to independent prescribers undertaking clinical skills training. They would do the online material, come in, work with other colleagues face to face. And one of the things which was quite nice about this work is we got recognized, the Royal Pharmaceutical Society recognized us. So I know what online teaching is like. But one of the things I think when we're doing online and when we're creating using LT is to tap into all our resources. And one of our most important resources are our students as potential creative co-producers. And I just want to highlight a couple of examples from my previous work at Robert Gordon University. And this is an example of work that a colleague, Dr. Hélène Widmer, undertook, where she was trying to change how we did our pharmacokinetics. And she got students to start storyboarding things using images, rather than just cut and paste information, try and get them to produce information. And hopefully, as you can see, produce quite remarkable images and some really quite interesting ways of dealing with pharmacokinetics. And here she is taking her own approach to distancing, thinking that perhaps this might help people keep more than 2 meters away from her. I'm not quite sure. But other ways we can tap into our students as partners and co-producers is in summer scholarships and projects. And LT actually allows us to do this. And even under the current environment, I would argue, and I'll try and persuade you, that actually we could use LT for summer scholarships and projects in the development of teaching materials, in the development of material for publication, for quality improvement. And a colleague of mine, previous colleague now, Amy Arnold, worked with actually two students from the University of Tasmania to produce learning materials that she went on to use in RGU to teach pharmacy students. But it's really important who you find as your partners. One of the things about this is you're going to have to get outside your comfort zone. One of the things that is absolutely essential if you're going to make things new and interesting and work is to get out there and have a go at removing yourself from your comfort zone. And you need colleagues and supporters to do this. And here are a couple of examples of people who've been crucial to my development. Professor Alison Strath, who is now in Scottish Government and is interim Chief Pharmaceutical Officer in Scotland, basically making sure everybody gets their medicines. Dr. Stuart Cruikshank at RGU and Professor Derek Scott at Aberdeen University, who've been crucial in helping me develop my skills in using LT. So I think one of the things that you notice is that you really do need key teams of people in order to develop, and especially I think under current conditions, we need to make sure we're not isolated. So, okay, what about LT for lockdown and lessons now and beyond? Well, what I want to do is really say we need to stay connected, we need to collaborate, and we need to communicate. And this is an opportunity for me to do so. And it's really trying to share with you a couple of examples of where we've had a go at stuff to see whether it works. And I'll give you an example from the early days of lockdown and kind of what we're doing now, where we try and do some face-to-face, but whether we're better off considering virtual labs as a way forward. So once again, giving you a couple of the different options and a couple of different flavors of my experience anyway. So this was right at the beginning of lockdown, just as we were in the midst of teaching. We'd completed some of our lectures, some of our labs, and we went into lockdown. And I'm going to take an example from some students who were doing human nutrition and what their experience was like. I had decided in this module which I was running that their summative assessment would be a group report, and this year I was going to do it as an LT lesson. So we'd gone some way through the material. We hadn't got onto LT except to use it in the labs, and we went into lockdown. So how did we deal with it? And I think it gives us some lessons to how to approach lockdown and how to approach what happens next. So one of the great things with LT is with the idealized data or the pre-recorded data is that we were able to get the students to working as in groups and as individuals to go through the labs and look at the data. Now, this happened not to be a physiology lab, it was a psychology lab, the Stroop test. But they all completed it, they all had a go, and they all submitted, if you like, the lab. So they completed the lab online in lockdown. So that, for me, though I had to produce some material to kind of explain to them how to get the idealized data and support the information that was already there. But how to get them to use LT? Well, in RGU, the recording system that they use is Panopto. So I basically recorded myself building a lesson on LT, and I shared that with them. So I went into LT and showed them how to build a lesson and said, this is what I would like you to do as a group to build a report that you will submit as your summative assessment. So this was recorded. Once again, the words synchronous and asynchronous hadn't quite become as synonymous with our everyday living as it is now. But LT is great for this. People can go away, they can work in different places and come back and produce something collectively. We can produce things online, share it with the students. People can do it live. People can do it asynchronously, anytime, remote. Well, distance, not remote. Please, try not to be remote. But once again, we actually had the tools to do it because LT allowed us to do that. Now, this is the first time I'd done this as a project. So doing it for the first time and having a lockdown did actually make it a challenge. But we still had all the, if you like, the normal stuff, the everyday stuff. Moodle still did what Moodle does. Anybody, or whatever your virtual learning platform is. So we used that. What happened then? Well, the outcome was really, I think, well, as good as I'd hoped, to be honest. The students all the groups, all groups of 3 students, so 5 groups, all of them submitted reports, completed and on time. Okay, we allowed them a bit more time to do things, but they all completed things and they actually made really good use. This is an example from one of the projects, and I don't know particularly actually if it's I think it's probably one of the better ones, but they used images, they used links, they used LT, and they made an LT lesson that made sense. And as far as they were concerned, the outcomes were good. They all passed. We had a range of marks. We had 3 A's, 5 B's, 7 C's, reasonable range of marks. And we had a peer mark in there as well. So if people hadn't contributed, hadn't been engaged, or if people had particularly engaged and led on things, that they, if you like, were rewarded. And we found that that did actually shift the marks a bit. So once again, some of the, if you like, the conventional approaches that we take in teaching, we can apply with an LT. One of the things is also looking at the feedback. And once again, a fairly mixed bag. Somebody who found it very difficult, the idea of completing a group task while being in different places is difficult for them. And remember, this was very much early stages of lockdown. While somebody else thought it was the best thing since sliced bread. So once again, but it does show what can be achieved. Once again, if you have the right support and have the right colleagues, because I had support in doing this. So what about now? Where are we up to now? What are my views about LT under the current situation? Well, my views have been shaped by my own experience, as I think happens to our students. In May of this year, I started a new job as a lecturer in physiology here in the School of Life Sciences at the University of Glasgow. Here is our corporate face mask, for if anybody's wondering why I've got these images. And basically, I was in Aberdeen, but I was taking up a new post in Glasgow, and it took me 132 days to actually physically get into my office. Now, I shouldn't actually need to get into my office, but actually I do, because the flat that I'm moving into doesn't yet have broadband. So a number of things where I can identify, I think, quite well with the student experience at the minute. The other good thing is it's a new environment, it's a new place. So using LT in a completely new environment is a really interesting experience. So I've moved during lockdown, and I've started a new job. So what are we doing? What on earth are we doing? Well, this is what we're doing. We're making videos. We're making videos for sports science. Some of them, they aren't for LT. Not everything we're doing is LT based, but we have been filming pharmacology and physiology labs, which are LT'd. But what we're doing is adding extra bits, extra clips and extra information. So the students who can't get into the lab can get some of the experience. And those who are coming in, and some people have actually been running the pharmacology labs, the guinea pig ileum. So it is possible, but you have to space them out. And if you look at the spacing here, we can actually, I think, manage about a maximum of 8 students in there. This was using it for filming. So we're in effect using it as a film set and tapping into resources. This is Nigel Hutchins from our Leeds department, which is basically looking at learning and teaching materials. And he came in and did a really brilliant professional job filming us. But he's also shown us how to do things. So we've been learning. So not only have we been developing our teaching, but we have been learning, and the skills we've, if you like, we've encouraged and enhanced in each other. And as I say, we've done it in different areas. We've done it in sports science, and I can share some of these videos if you want, because we've done it across and are continuing to do it across subject areas. So we're doing lessons and labs for physiology, nursing. One of my responsibilities is physiology for nursing. And in all of this, what we're finding is that we really need to think about what we're doing. And one of the things is the planning, the design, the filming, the editing, the captioning, the modifying. And at the minute, we're trying to process map it so we can get a shared view of what we're trying to do and who does what. When are deadlines? What are deadlines? When does somebody have to deliver stuff by? When do we need to do it? And who's going to take responsibility? So one of the things we're doing is trying to come up with a process which allows us to, if you like, deliver new material for people to use LT. So this is really, quite a change. It's something that people have talked about a lot over the years, but actually to do it. And what I found is the people doing it, the people I've been working with, we are teaching and learning. We're teaching and learning from each other, and we're smiling. These people have kept me sane. This is important. LT is a platform. The people who use it and the people who we want to encourage to use it are the people who I think are so crucial to this experience. And that is something I think I really do want you to understand. And therefore, I want you to recognize who they are. And as I say, the fabulous Level 10 team, we're in the Boyd Orr building, where we teach most of the physiology, or certainly the LT-based stuff. This team has been crucial to me. And it's interesting, this is a team of technicians in charge, an apprentice, and graduate teaching assistants. Here are a group of collective rogues: Neil Russell, whose birthday was yesterday, Rob Cook, apprentice, and Michael Duncan. Neil and Michael are both GTAs and have run labs across the school for years. And they have been crucial in helping me. But the other people who've been crucial are Patricia Davidson, who's technician in charge of this lab, and our new recruit, Mary Bowers, who I knew from RGU, who's also, if you want a bespoke face mask, a work of complete genius. So these are the people who are actually doing the work. And I think it's quite an interesting observation that actually these are the people who are actually sometimes in quite precarious positions, particularly GTAs, maybe on what amounts to 0-hour contracts. These are people who are not necessarily recognized. And I think the work that the Technicians Charter or Technicians Commitment, the work that people like Derek Scott have been doing in Aberdeen, where encouraging us to make sure that the technical staff are engaged in developing and designing our labs and involved in the development and delivery of our teaching. These people I had, while I was in Aberdeen, weekly meetings with them. We had a weekly catch up about LT and about how things were going. And I think it acted as a bit of a therapy session, but also as a discussion point for how we could use LT. So I think these people are perhaps underappreciated and certainly underutilized. And if one of the things that we need to learn from this current situation is the important skills that people bring to our teaching, but also to have that recognized so that their chances of promotion and progression are reflected in the skills and the development and the sheer effort they put into this. And then the other evening, these guys were working until 12 to develop materials for people to develop and deliver later in the week. So once again, I really do think it's important that the people you have around you are essential to making this work. And certainly this has been my experience. So this is a very personal view, but this is something that really matters to me. So I think that really is all I want to cover. I know it's under 30 minutes, but it was really just trying to focus on my experience. I will happily answer questions. I want to acknowledge a couple of people or a couple of organisations, NHS Education for Scotland, who provided us with a lot of the initial funding for our work with LT in Robert Gordon. AD Instruments, who I haven't really talked about, but are partners in this and have been very early on. Mairead Fountain, who was working for AD Instruments, who now I think is Otago Polytechnic, was central to giving us insight into educational design. And it's really important that you bring in people with those different viewpoints. And most of all, you bring in these people, the students, that we can lurk around in the background and help and promote. But these are the people that really are central to this process. So, as I say, a little bit of a whistle-stop tour, but hopefully getting across some of the important points. Occasionally, I know, mounting my soapbox, but nonetheless, hopefully that's been of use to you. And I'm very happy to answer any questions people have. I haven't really looked at the chat, so I'm just going to stop sharing, and you're going to have to put up with my face now. But there you go. So there you go. A little bit of a whistle-stop tour.
Thank you very much, Ian, for your very insightful talk. If you have any questions, please do feel free to put that in the question and A box at the bottom of your screens, or if you'd like to speak and ask your question verbally, please do raise your hand and we will unmute you. Thank you very much.
Hi Ian, I think there's a question from Darren in the Q&A about feedback from your students on your LT content as used for remote teaching.
Yeah, I think there's the two groups. There was the initial online kind of the professionals, the independent prescribers who we actually built into it kind of feedback, and they were really quite happy. The groups that we've used at the minute, I think the ones from RGU where I did the group report, as I say, it was a mixed bag. Some really liked it. Some found the fact that they couldn't meet physically a problem, but their feedback on LT content and their feedback on LT was actually fairly positive. They found it reasonably easy to use. Certainly they found the information very useful. So I think both in developing lessons, they found it useful, and also in the content of those lessons. Yeah. Yeah, video editing. Give it to a professional. No. Sorry, that was John Seeley who's asking, do we have any recommendations? We do. We've now started doing a little bit ourselves. We've used kind of some freeware, free software, but we're quite happy to share that with you if you want. I can kind of send you some of the information if you want. I'm happy to share it. I mean, I'm happy for AD Instruments to share my email address if people want to directly get into contact with me. But as I say, we've been using free software for editing. As I say, we think we want to maybe move up and use something which we maybe pay for. But I think the other person, James Clark at King's, is also he's a video wizard. So he would be somebody else to ask, and he's in the kind of LT users group. Where else do we have? Okay, so Derek Scott's asking about training people. I think, once again, I think the common experience, we've had people who are really enthusiasts and kind of jumped in and really taken to it. What we're finding is actually more and more people are, and I have a feeling that some of the pressure of our current situation, that people are finding it actually a way of dealing with how do we deliver, if you like, real lab data. Once again, I think we have to be careful that we're not going to be seen as a LT editing suite. I think trying to persuade people to take that responsibility on themselves is always a challenge. But actually, I've been really impressed with my colleagues, hugely impressed with the team on level 10. I mean, they've been fabulous. But actually, a lot of the course leaders have been really good as well. So some real positives, actually. Other people, I think, once again, it's about change management, giving them the opportunity to see how it can help, and also sharing good practice. I think sharing good practice is perhaps the best way, showing them what you can do. And I know it's not always comfortable, because it does look like a bit like showing off sometimes, but you do actually, I think, have to put out your good practice.
Ian, I think there's a question from Darren Brown in the chat. He's wondering if you use Panopto recordings in LT.
We use Panopto I used Panopto in RGU to record me using LT, if you see what I mean. And that was because Panopto was the system which was in place. I've used it now with Zoom as well. I've done a Zoom teaching sessions, so I haven't done it the other way, trying to put some from Panopto into LT, but I've used Panopto to deliver it, and it worked fine as a recording system. So I'm not quite sure if that's what the question was. Sorry, I can't see that one. Has the chat gone?
Hi, Ian. I have a question for you. Hopefully I'm coming across okay. This is Amy.
Yes. Hi.
Hi. Can you explain a little bit more about the exercise that you had your students with authoring within LT, and how that went?
Well, yeah, because I usually we get students, you know how it is, go and write a report, that's our usual our output very often for an assessment. And I just thought that rather than having yet another 2,000 word report, that maybe using an LT lesson would be an interesting way of reporting. So I asked them to report on an introduction to research project, which was basically for them to come up with a hypothesis of something they wanted to test in nutrition. So a dietary intervention and what effect it might have on behavior, reaction times, learning, memory. And so they went away and as a group of 3 students had to come up with a hypothesis, something they wanted to test, and describe within their lesson what they wanted to do, how they wanted to do it. So they would produce background information, much like you would with an introduction in a report. But because they could use LT, they could put in links directly to a paper, they could give background information, they could define words, they could put in images, things which normally are quite difficult. Once again, with all the usual criteria to do with, whether you can use the images or not. And then say what they would hope the output of their research would be and where it would lead. They also had to deal with references. So all the things you would expect in a report, but delivered through an LT lesson. So that was I think, the first time I've ever used it for that use. What I had to do is give them authoring rights and set them up in, if you like, little courses of their own, so that they would only see their own material. But they were able to get on and do it. And you could also see the activity, who was the most active, who had been editing it most recently. So it was really quite an interesting, a small group, it was only 15 students, but it was really quite an interesting experience. And the quality of what they came up with, I was really impressed with. And I'm not sure I would do it for a huge class, but it's certainly a way forward, I think, for tapping into a more inventive approach, a more creative approach for some of these reports, and also some of the things that they're going to have to do out in the real world. If they're going to report to colleagues, perhaps not everybody wants a 10-page report. Maybe they want links, maybe they want to see YouTube videos, things like that. So hopefully that gives you a flavor of what it was like.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thank you. And I really like how you've included that real world aspect, as you mentioned. Yeah, you don't necessarily need that 20-page report in front of you if you're trying to get the concept across.
Yeah, can I have 1 page of A4, please? And but I think they appreciated that, and actually they didn't go overboard on the images and the figures. They were actually really quite kind of focused. And yeah, I'd say I wouldn't like to try it with a big group because of just actually how you'd have to organize it in LT. But certainly as a first, and also dealing with the asynchronous, that they therefore as a group, they can work at it at whatever time suits them.
Yeah.
And I think that for me is also one of the revelations of this, that everybody's been talking about asynchronous working.
Yeah.
And here we have a way of doing it.
Yeah, they have to take the creative control on themselves and organize that. Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's okay.
I think there's some other questions that have come through. Yeah,
okay.
I'll let Kat. I'll let Kat lead that.
Sorry. Yeah. Where are we up to? Yeah. So yeah, where are we? I just go through in the order. I think there's one again from Derek about training purposes for LT. Yeah. Yeah, we really haven't made enough use of it yet. Mary Bowers, who's just joined us, is really keen on using it for capturing training for the labs. So you can use it for all sorts of purposes, and I think the training purposes is a really good use. And I think the kind of material you can, and also you can see how people interact with it. So yeah, I would go for that, definitely. John was asking about larger classes. Yeah, I think with group working, it's always an issue. Ideally, small groups of 3 is fine, but if you have a really large class, it's going to be difficult potentially. In LT, the issue is with authoring. That I think it becomes quite a challenge. But certainly for lab stuff, one of the things we're going to be trying to do a bit more of is actually using it with some of our bigger labs and getting students to work as groups. I saw, and I've forgotten her name, and I do apologize, from the University of Sydney, where they've been using LT for groups, lab groups, using Zoom, where you can share screen. So I think it's possible. I think once again, it's trying it and being willing to have a plan B when it goes a little bit pear-shaped. So I think it's possible, and we're going to try some of the larger classes. Whether we're going to do group work or whether we'll get them to do it as individuals, it's a bit. I would like them to do it as groups, because I think the benefit that comes from working and socializing, I think we need, particularly under these conditions, to socialize learning. If we don't, we have a lot of people just working away on their own. And you and I, probably more and well aware of the challenges of that. And we really don't want to encourage that. I think for our students and for ourselves, socialized learning and socialized working is really important. But what I can tell you is it will let you know. We're happy to share stuff. We're happy to share experience. And if things are not working, equally, we may also come back to AD Instruments and say, okay, can you add a new tweak to LT so that we can do this more easily? And once again, people like Tom have been very helpful in us being enabled to do this. So sorry about that. That's a long, well, that's my way of answering, I'm afraid. Sorry, Mary. Oh, right. Yeah, I think interaction is interesting on LT because you can build in the questions, so you can get a certain amount of response. So you can kind of encourage students to engage by doing questions and providing feedback. What we have done in the past with the CPD is kind of have questions for your tutor. So kind of the things you might want to ask, and that might be, a way of building a rapport. I think the social interaction, trying to get them to work as groups, is probably the best way. So you make it less virtual and more social. But I think those are the struggles we've got at the minute. And I think we just have to try it. And I think, as you know, the best way is to come up with a plan, see if we can deliver it, and hopefully engage our students, but also ask for feedback. I think somebody earlier asked about feedback. I think we need to build in our feedback so it's not at the end of the semester or the end of the year. We really need to make sure that feedback at the minute is really quite lively and quite immediate. Certainly some of the tutorial groups I've been running, I think it's possible that we could use those kind of tutorial sessions, kind of post-lab sessions, which maybe have groups of 15, that then we could get that interaction. But I think a lot of students have they see the black screen of Zoom and, they go, well, I'm in my pajamas. Why on earth do I want to interact? So once again, I think there's some challenges. And I think if we share best practice, once again, if we share what works, we're maybe in with a shout. I don't know if there's any more. I think that's us. I'm sorry if I've missed any. Yeah. As I say, happy to anybody who does want to chat later or want to get in touch with us. More than happy to share. We've had a long history of working as a Scottish LT group users, and now the UK and the Europe-wide user groups. I think sharing best practice is the way forward. So more than happy to chat.
Thank you very much, Ian. My colleague will be passing out your email address to the attendees of this call. So if there are any questions, do let us know or get in contact with Ian directly.
Yeah.
So I guess this is the end of our session now.
That's good.
No one else has any more questions?
No. Okay. Well, thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting me along, and thank you everybody for the interesting questions, and hopefully be in chat sometime soon. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian, and we will reconvene at 1 o'clock with a session from Tom Broughton, our Customer Success Manager, for anyone that would like to join. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ian.